Hi, everybody. Stephanie Kraft here, and today I am with Jane Masteller, and she is an astrocartographer. Astrocartography is the astrology of location, and the reason I'm interviewing Jane is because I had a reading with her when I was contemplating moving. I was living in Virginia and I wanted to move to South Carolina, and I had a session with Jane and she helped me tremendously, and it was so interesting. And I did end up moving to South Carolina, and I'm so happy, and I'm by the beach, and that was my intention. So anyway, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jane, and I would like to ask you to tell everybody about your work, everything you do, and what astrocartography is, even beyond my little brief introduction.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Jane Masteller from janemasteller.com. And I utilize astrology to help empower you with the knowledge of who you are, of the relationships with people and places surrounding you, and help demystify how the current transiting planets are influencing our current events. So I love astrology. I live and breathe it. I think it all the time. And my favorite readings to do is what Stephanie was saying was the astrocartography readings, also known as location astrology. And what's so awesome about that is if you know your exact birth time, you can find out where the planetary lines are influencing you in your current area of residence, anywhere in the country that you live in, and actually anywhere in the whole world. And it can make such a difference with your experience, whether you might be on a planetary line that is considered traditionally difficult or something that is challenging in your own chart, and things just may be seemingly so hard for you. But if you have the ability to know where the energy is softer, easier, more supportive, and to tap into that, it's like all those troubles are just like a bad memory once you can get into a better area. So your exact birth time is needed. And what we can do is I say, let's look at where your current location is so you know how you're currently being influenced. And let's pick three other locations. And the client may say, look into these three places for me, or they may say, I'm completely open anywhere in the United States, and these are my preferences for climate and population and so forth. And then we see what we can do. So, in addition to the location astrology readings, I also love, 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 love the relationship readings, because that can really help you understand what is going on in your relationship. So, it's fantastic, particularly for romantic relationships, but you can get this done with any relationship that you're in to understand how the energy is working with you. So, particularly for romantic relationships, we can see what are the strengths here? What are the best things that we see going on with the compatibility? And what are some of the challenges? And perhaps you're not in a relationship, but you're just thinking maybe I should date them. Is it even worth my time? So I can look at the information even without a person's birth time and be able to tell you if the planets are looking like they're close enough in orb in a beneficial way that makes it worth your time to consider this individual to date. So, in addition to the relationship readings, of course, I do the natal chart, birth chart readings, which I can really point out where your strengths are, and you can really have more compassion with yourself about some of the challenges that you may have because it's in your chart. That we've been stamped with this. It's like our DNA. And lastly, of course, the predictive forecast readings. So I like to incorporate the transiting planets as well as different other predictive techniques of solar arc and progressions and looking at eclipses to help you have an idea of what to expect in the upcoming year or even in the upcoming month. So I do yearly readings, but I also have a subscription where I can check in with you every month, either on a video or on a one-on-one. Zoom meeting, because I find that when we do the prediction for the year, it's either that we have to just keep it down to the five most important changes we see in the year and focus on that and do a deep dive, uh, because it's the person can forget a lot of information once that year has happened. So that's why the monthly subscription is so awesome, because then you have me reminding you every month, like, this is what's going on, this is still present, and these are your most important dates. So that's for my services that I offer with astrology. And you can look on my website. I'm janemasteller.com. And I also do flower essence sprays, which are amazingly powerful. I do different I don't think you can see it with the, oh, I'll put it in front of me here, but this is flower essences. I utilize Australian bush flower essences, Bach, and Findhorn, and I make different sprays to help release challenging emotions. This one is a fear release. And what they do is they bring out the very best in you, and they flood your system with the positive vibration that it carries. And they are very safe. They are very powerful. And so these are some of my secret weapons. And I also am starting to do some frequency healing using some voice activated technology, where we take samples of your voice and then give you certain tracks to listen to that the system has denoted these are the best frequencies to help get you where you need to be feeling your best. And I can make customized playlists as well to help be giving you the frequencies of whatever you're trying to obtain. So those are some things about myself. Lastly, I am a speech language pathologist, and that's what I have been doing for 20 years. So I do have a passion of trying to combine all my holistic techniques together to help the children and the family who's also holistic minded, where I can work with children who have any kind of issue, even if they're just a typically developing child, and help parents understand what is in that child's astrology chart, how their chart interacts with their child's chart, how they can utilize flower essences so they can both be as regulated and their best possible selves, and utilizing any other strategies I know as an educator, as a speech language pathologist, that could help with executive functioning skills, communication, and so on.
That is so amazing. I would like to say that flower essences are life-changing. They are so powerful and amazing. I'm so glad you do that work. And it's a miracle, God's gift to the earth, these flowers, and then how we can use them to shift our energies. It's amazing. And our emotions. Wow, you do amazing things. And it's so interesting that you're a speech language pathologist, because astrology is another language. And so it's such a I'm not a speech language pathologist, but I study foreign languages and speak foreign languages. And so I love astrology too. So it's really interesting. What do you have in the ninth house? What sign is,
Mm.
or do you have any planets there?
Well, I have Chiron in Taurus in the ninth house, and it's on the cusp of Aries, the later degrees of Aries.
Interesting. Wow.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's so interesting because, well, and we could talk about the third house too with the communication, but so what do you have in the third house?
I have Uranus in the third house, and
Wow.
I that's one of my favorite placements, because I always like to think like I think like I'm an original thinker. I there's a genius quality in there. I wasn't in the I considered a genius in the traditional academic school, but geniusness can come in other things as we really unfold on our path, and we learn like, oh, this is where I'm gifted. So I think differently than other people. And I literally, Uranus rules astrology. So it's like I think like an astrologer. And with the children that I see, I noticed that in my chart, I have the Chiron in the ninth house, which you mentioned before, and it makes a somewhat of a harsh aspect, a square to Mercury. And so Mercury is the communication planet, and Chiron is the planet that deals with wounding and healing. So sometimes those are combined together, can become the speech language pathologist. And then, of course, since that is in my own chart, you can probably imagine I was not the most fantastic, gifted speaker myself growing up. And it actually was course of a lot of pain and shame because I didn't know how to communicate socially. And so I just would just do agreeable things, make everyone happy, but then I would be, miserable trying to be people pleasing people. So even just learning some basic social emotional training skills as an adult when I took continuing education was a huge game changer. But I've heard people say that you go into the field to help people in an area where you actually need help too. And I remember I would be doing assessments on children, and I remember it was like, you've just made a mistake and hurt someone's feelings. What are 3 things you should do? And I was doing the test. I was like, oh my gosh, I wouldn't have thought of these 3 things. I didn't know. I didn't know I should have said that too. So I did learn to become a better communicator through trying to learn how to teach the students to be better
That's so
communicators.
amazing. Yeah, they say we teach what we need to learn.
Mhm, mhm,
So, oh, I love it. So let's talk about astrocartography. So
mhm,
I just want to like let people know what you already did, but I'll give a simple illustration of it. You overlay. I mean, you don't do it, but the computer programs overlay your natal chart, your birth chart, over the map of the world, and your planetary lines that were present at birth, the lines will go down across the map. And so wherever those lines are, those are the major lines like of the planets, Uranus, Pluto, Venus, Mars, Mercury, the sun, the moon, etc. And so I wouldn't recommend to anybody to just go on anything like astrodart.com and do that and look at it and think that you can do it yourself because you can't, which we're going to get into that in depth
mhm,
because it takes way more than that. But that's just an illustration of what astrocartography is. And then a professional astrocartographer like Jane can actually utilize software that you actually have to pay for to see the relevant information that is really pertinent, really informative and important when you're looking at where to live or where to go on a vacation or where to move, where the best places for you are. And so let's talk. I'll share my quick story and then I'll ask you some questions about it. I was living on my Saturn parent line, and a parent line are they're longitudinal lines where two planets are crossing. So it's a point it's a line, but with a where two planets cross, and there's you can look at a certain mile radius around those to get more of an effect. And the further out from that point you go, the less of an effect it would have. And of course, if I say anything wrong, Jane, correct me because I am definitely not a professional astrocartographer at all. I mean, I'm not one at all. I'm an astrologer, but I don't do astrocartography. I don't know a lot about it. But I was living on my Saturn parent line, which you had pointed out to me. I lived there for 3 years in Virginia, and in Central Virginia, and it was the worst for me. It was so horrible. I was paralyzed. I was like paralyzed, not like physically, but kind of physically because I couldn't do anything. I was felt oppressed and suppressed and inhibited and isolated and I wouldn't say depressed, but if I went into a description of how I felt, I'm sure like a professional would have said that's called depression. Although I didn't feel depression, it was probably exhibiting, if that makes sense. But anyway, not like crying depression, but more like stagnant. I was stagnant. And that was Saturn. Saturn is like does exemplify, isolation, pressure, oppression, hard work, and limitations, restrictions, isolation, so and depression, so all of those things. And I just hated it. It was a horrible, it was even hard to move because even though I wanted to get out of there more than anything, just the physical act of getting out of bed and packing my boxes was hard to do. I'm telling you, it was hard to do anything. So, anyway, I did end up getting out of there. But where I'm living now is on my Moon Jupiter parent line, and which you told me about, which I would have never have known. And that is about for feelings of well-being and expansion and home and feeling at home And I do. I feel so good here. I feel so happy. I don't know if I could ever even be depressed here, because I feel just good. So thank you for that reading and guiding me and teaching me about these parent lines, which I did not know about. So that's my story with like my move and my session with you. And I'm gonna ask you like, have what have you noticed personally on different lines, whether you traveled there or relocated?
Oh, okay. I'm going to answer that. And I want to say one thing about your chart before we get going was that I reviewed it last night because I was like, oh, I want to see how what this was. And it's not just the moon Jupiter that you're within 2 degrees of. You're also on it's Neptune North Node line, I
Oh
believe. Let
my
me double
God.
check. Yeah. And that's the one that's even closer. Neptune North Node. So that is fantastic for a person who is doing intuitive readings right here. I mean, it's just 100% like your North Node is what you need for your destiny in order to really challenge your soul to move into uncharted territory. And Neptune is all about your spirituality, and your business is very spiritual, very intuitive. Hypnotherapy is ruled by Neptune. So this was like just an absolute blessing for you to go to. And then when you're referring to Moon Jupiter, that's even a little bit further away, but you're still feeling the good effects of that. It's still less than 2 degrees of an orb. And you're feeling so great, even though technically you are still on the major Saturn line, remember? So,
Are you saying that? So where I was before in Virginia, that was it this is it the same major Saturn line that's running from
this is in North Myrtle Beach that I ran last night, right? That's where
right
you
where
live right
I'm living
now.
now?
Okay, so now you are still on the Saturn line, the major Saturn line. However, you have gotten over to these nice parent lines that have just made it been much better. So you're not you're getting the support of that. And so sometimes the parent lines where we'll talk about how when you pull up the map you won't just you'll see like some colored lines going through the United States. You won't see the parent lines unless you click on the software. And really, it's best to have professional software because astro.com, it's kind of confusing. It's hard to know which ones are the closest ones to that location that you clicked on. But just by you were kind of moving still straight north and south kind of thing. But just by going north and south, you were able to tap into those latitude lines. And
Yeah.
that's what made a huge shift for you. So this is a good example that you can sometimes still be on a challenging line like Saturn, but you're not feeling, all the heaviness and sadness and things. It's more like, okay, yeah, I like to work, and yeah, I'm feeling good because Saturn's work. So if you're a entrepreneur or something, or you're serious about your work, it can be supportive. But if you don't have some of those other supportive parents, or you have other parent lines that are bringing you down, then it can be just a stinker location. So Stephanie is a perfect, beautiful example of how she was able to tap into those better parent lines and just shine where she's at.
I had no idea I was on a Saturn line here, and I do not feel it at all.
Mhm.
But I've always loved Saturn. Love
Mhm.
is kind of a strong word. I've never minded Saturn. I've always thought I am an entrepreneur. I am work focused, and I like growth, and I like I've never been against Saturn, but the feeling that I had living there was just horrible. And
Mhm.
so it's fascinating to me. Like you said, I had no idea I was on a Saturn line here, but the parent lines that are here are so
Mhm.
beneficial for me. And I didn't know I was on the Neptune North Node parent.
Yeah.
I will tell you this. The only thing that I really want to do, well, actually, I live by the water, so I'll tell you this part too. Look at that. Neptune is water.
Mhm.
What isn't he like the god of the sea or something?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
what's his name? I
uh
forget. Poseidon.
Yeah,
I'm forgetting the
Poseidon.
other one. I always call it them. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I go to the beach, I go to the water every day, and it's like maybe more than one time a day because I can walk there. And like, and it's my favorite thing. And so that's interesting about here. And um the main things, the only thing I want to do, I want to do my work, which I love working with my clients. I'm an energy healer and it's my favorite thing to do. But in addition to that, I just want to do creative things. And that is Neptune. I did not know. I was like, okay, all I want to do is make creative videos. I actually started playing the piano here, practicing I haven't played in forever. And oh God, doorbell just rang. Hope you guys didn't hear that. I'm going to ignore that. It's like I want to work on music this is Neptune, right? The creativity, the arts. And so I've been playing the piano, which I haven't done in many years. I want to make creative things. I want to do creative projects. I make botanical perfumes with essential oils, and that's been my goal to really work on that. I haven't been able to start yet just because I'm still unpacking and getting organized, but my goals are all in the creative areas. That was my intention when I came here, and I had no idea Neptune. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because this is all correlated to Neptune. I didn't know about that. I mean, that's crazy. So, all right. And then, yeah, go right ahead and answer
Okay.
the question I asked, which was, what have you noticed with your movement across
S-
places?
So when I first heard about this, I thought, well, I'm going to reflect on if I've been in this area and if certain situations came up that I thought could be related to that planetary energy. So I'll start with some observations about the Saturn line. So my family used to vacation to my aunt and uncles that lived over on the Saturn line. And I remember I was on something called an alpine slide and I was going really fast on it. I wasn't using the brake at all. I don't even know if I knew I had a brake. And I actually flew out of the alpine slide and cut myself up pretty good. And it was pretty scary. And I'm thinking like Saturn deals with like restrictions and caution. And I was using none of that. So then I got one of the negative consequences you can have on the Saturn line, which can deal with injuries. So I had an injury on that Saturn line. And then another time when we went to go visit my aunt and uncle, it was when I had just first started dating someone. I was really into him. And out of the blue, he called me up and said, I don't want to be in a relationship anymore. I'm still in high school. And I said, why? He said, I just want to be single. I said, oh my God. So I went there. I was so depressed. Saturn deals with depression. And then I come back. He says, I changed my mind. Let's get back together. However, the damage had already been done, Saturn had brought down my self-esteem, and I could never feel comfortable in that relationship again. And I was sad for many, many years about how that relationship transpired, how it didn't end well. So, another thing about the Saturn line, I remember that when I went to go visit someone at the Saturn line, they were kind of like acting kind of how you would expect like a Saturn individual to be, like serious and kind of cranky and kind of bossy. She came to wake me up, and instead of saying like morning, time to get up, it was like, get out of bed. We've got things to do. And I'm I'm thinking to myself, this Saturn line is crazy. And I was like, I'm like, okay. So she said, let's go on a hike. I'm like, I'm going to go on the hike. And I'm hiking, and Saturn is limiting my air. I'm not used to being up on the mountain. I'm feeling weak because just even around that time, I had to go on a restricted diet to try and find out what food was inflaming me. So had a very restricted diet. I wasn't having energy, all very Saturn things. So those were, oh, and another thing, once I did a continuing education class on the Saturn line remotely, and I didn't read the fine print. And it had said, it said that your school district will pay for this training, but you have to come to here and work next year. Otherwise, you have to pay for it. Well, I didn't even read it. I was careless. I signed my name. And then later, when the bill comes saying you're not working at that district anymore, I said, oh my God, you guys should have bolded that or highlighted it. I didn't even look. But then I had to say to myself, but Jane, that was a Saturn lesson. You're the one who needed to be responsible and read something before you signed it. So Saturn teaches hard lessons. So that's Saturn. And I'll talk a little bit about Neptune. I went to Neptune line is over in Florida. And that one was just really just so sometimes astrology can be so just exact. So Neptune deals with gases. And I literally went there, and the host that was hosting me was on a high fat diet, and we were eating all this bacon, things I wasn't used to or whatever. That night, I'm laying in the bathroom having the most horrible gas pains in my life, and just thinking like, oh, it's the Neptune line gas line gas. I've got such a upset stomach. And then additionally, the Neptune line can deal with disillusionments where you have in your mind, a fantasy about how something's going to be, and it's not like that at all. And I had traveled to the Neptune line to see if there might be someone there that I might be connecting with romantically. And it was like the minute you know how you've heard people say that you can pretty much know when you look at someone if it's a possibility that you might be interested in them. Of course, there's exceptions. But the minute I looked at the individual, I was like, oh, that's not how I pictured you, even though he had shown me a picture of him and everything. I thought he was older than me, but I thought he looked a lot older. So that was an example of just being very disillusioned, going there and realizing this isn't going to work. This is not a match, and having the rose-colored glasses on before going there. Oh, maybe I'll move there. Maybe we won't be dating, but maybe we'll live together. Just complete fantasy. And on the Neptune line, it's really not the best place to be unless you're a very solid person and you're working on your spirituality. If you don't have your stuff together and you think you're going to move to the Neptune line, you can expect more of what you've been getting that you don't like, unfortunately. So over to the Mars line, where I resided in Chicago, Illinois. So Mars is like a hot planet. And what was so amazing to me was that the place that I lived for, I guess, around approximately 12 years, it was on the third floor of a house, and we had these sun roofs, whatever it was, so you could see these rectangles on the ceiling, so you could see the stars and the sun and everything. And it was hot. It was very hot there. And I would travel around and do speech therapy in children's homes, and I would be wondering, oh goodness, I don't think this house has air conditioning. Is it going to be hot? No, none of the houses were as hot as my own house was. It was very, very hot temperature, like Mars would be. Now, Mars is an area where you can have accidents. Now, my Mars and my chart was fairly protected. However, you're kind of pushing your luck sometimes, especially if you're staying for extended periods of time on some of these malefic planets. So I had situations where I was hit crossing the street by a car. I was hit riding my bike by a car right around the same area within like one block. And then when I tried to enter a bus once, the bus driver, I was already jumping on the bus fast because I'm on the Mars line. I'm doing things fast. And they didn't know I was getting on so fast. They start lowering the bus. My body can't adjust to me, my foot going downward while the bus is going downward. I twist my ankle and break it. So three pretty significant times of injury on the Mars line. But thankfully, two of them was no broken bones, but it was quite scary. But the Mars line in general, also that what I noticed was Mars is known for irritability, anger, and just a general kind of like hostility and contempt. And so you'd see that in the area. I was in Chicago, so that was definitely things that I would see, and I would have to learn how to work with people who were much more assertive than I was. And this was actually one of the things that is the benefit of moving to a line is that you can really incorporate and integrate that planetary energy and make it stronger in yourself based on your own astrology chart. So my Mars had a weakness. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. I didn't know how to say no, but through the experiences I had in the Chicago area with the continuing education class that I took and so forth, my Mars became stronger and I learned how to do those things. So there is a silver lining if you are stuck on a line that doesn't seem fortunate, you are getting some kind of value from it, even though it can be a hard lesson. Real quickly, I'll just say also most interesting thing when I went to my Mercury line, which was in Australia. So this corresponded with me learning astrology. I had just was going to go to a trip to Australia in January, and in December I was at a bar and a woman was talking to myself and the gentleman I was with, and she was doing a reading on us just based on our sun signs. And I remember thinking, how does she do that? And I want to be able to do what she just did. So that was right around the time I was going to the Mercury line all the way over in Sydney, Australia. So I get this one book, the only astrology book you'll ever need, a good starter book. And that's when it really kicked off my interest in astrology, and it never stopped. But Mercury is all about intellectual stimulation. And so, how interesting that it was right around the time that I was going to the Mercury line that I started to learn astrology. Now, I've also ended up moving over to my Venus line and my Chiron line, these two crossing lines. And one thing I've noticed is interesting is that a lot of the people who I meet here, they have a strong connection with me and their chart with Venus or Chiron or both. And so also other people that I'm friends with over here on the Chiron line, they are also on their Chiron line. So it's something to note that when you're over there, that's the type of individuals, the energy of the other people is going to be too. There's going to be an emphasis of that. So on the Mars line, I was around people who maybe were quite competitive and who were maybe disagreeable in some ways, like something always to kind of be a little irritated about. Whereas on the Venus line, I'm surrounded by healers with Chiron energy. So one of my closest friends is studying shamanism, and another woman that I was associated with, she would do a white magic kind of spells type of thing. So it's very interesting, and it's so fun once you can start to study it and see how it all plays out. And that's some of my observations of the lines that I have in the United States and Australia.
So interesting,
Mhm.
so interesting. Um, so can you talk about what the difference is between living on a major planetary line versus a parent line?
Absolutely. So now sometimes we can have in our chart it can all flow together beautifully. Well, so let's say that if we want to maybe go to one of the lines that aren't necessarily considered benefic, I mean malefic or challenging, and we say I want to go to one of those better lines, and then oh, I'm going to look in my chart, have an astrologer look at my chart and make sure that that planet in my chart is not afflicted and that it's sitted pretty well. And oh, isn't that perfect? That's the area I would consider moving to. And then it goes just great and fine. But most of us have pretty challenging charts. And it can be like we might say, I want to go to the Venus line, but you might not understand that your Venus is not in a productive zodiac sign, or it can be highly afflicted by other planets making aspects to it. So sometimes it's even more preferable not to be on or really close one of those major lines. Because when you go on one of those major lines, like if I'm on the Venus line, I'm on the Chiron line, it's going to highlight everything that you have in your own chart for that planetary energy. So you have to make sure that that planet in your own natal chart is strong enough that it's not going to turn into a nightmare going there. And the major lines are very powerful. They are very powerful. Some people who I've studied astrocartography with, they say that the parent line is maybe a third of the power of a major line. However, if they're not near a major line, then that's the one that takes the primary power. So sometimes it can be advantageous. If you see in your chart that you've got a lot of challenging aspects, there's no planet that's a clear winner in an area where you'd want to go to, you say, let's just find a good latitude. That's the parent line, a good latitude. The best parent line, like Stephanie, Moon, Jupiter, that's one of the best. That's where everyone's feeling good. It's pixie dust. You find a parent line and you say like, okay, I'm getting the supportive energies of these planets that are working well for me based on my goals and aspirations, but I'm not having a certain planet so extremely highlighted. So it really depends on the individual which way to go, as well as just how the map ends up being, because the map is different for everyone. Everyone's astrocartography map is different.
Oh my gosh, that is
Mhm.
so important to know, to look at your own planets in your
Mhm.
chart. And like my Saturn is in the 12th house. So
Mm.
I'm gonna be isolated probably no matter what, but like I, I'm living I'm living on a Saturn line. It's even more so, but it's okay. I mean, I don't mind it because that's how I've always been. But I'm an introvert and I love being alone. I mean, I want a social connections, but it's so interesting to look at this. How, like I didn't really think about that too much, that our own how our planets are placed are really gonna affect how we feel and what we experience on those lines. It's yeah. So like, oh, and I want to talk to you about this after, but I'm gonna mention it now because it's interesting. Because I want to ask your opinion about it. Because Neptune is not the greatest. It can be really good. I mean,
Mhm.
it's the higher octave of Venus, it's unconditional love, but like you said, it's also disillusionment. You can be wearing rose-colored glasses. And I've been like that a lot. And I looked at um, Neptune recently in my chart. My Neptune aspects every single planet in my chart and angle. It aspects absolutely everything in my chart. That's insanity.
And not only does it aspect it a lot, but I remember from your chart, it has one of the most powerful aspects it can have of, I believe it's the trine to your sun,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's incredibly powerful. And I can relate because I've noticed that about my own chart that, but I don't think I have the angles as well like you do. But it really shows that sometimes you can be like a Neptunian or a Piscean type of person and not realize it unless you really understand how prominent that planet is in your chart.
Yeah, and when you do, there's a way that you can calculate the percentages of the plant, the signs. Like I'm not Neptunian, I'm not Piscean in my top four. I'm more like Leo, Cancer, Gemini, Aquarius. Those probably are the four. But then when we look at it like that, when we look at Neptune and we see it aspecting everything, we have to take that into account. But also it's an out of sign conjunction, but it's conjunct Jupiter. So that magnifies it even more, which is crazy. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. In depth if we want, not on video, but
Oh, just real
yeah.
quick, I want to say so, and then another advantage to the parents is you don't have to look so closely at what is happening in your own chart with the parents. So Stephanie has Neptune North Node, so we don't need to, for a parent line, worry too much. Okay, what's happening with Stephanie's Neptune and North Node? But for the major lines, we want to look at that.
Oh
And
my God.
they're,
Oh, that's
yeah.
good. That's so
Mhm.
interesting. I did not know that either. Um, so we on the same line that we're talking about right now. If an astrologer uses sidereal versus placidus or tropical, would that difference show up in an astrocartography reading?
Well, the actually I learned about astrocartography from a sidereal astrologer, and everything that he told me would came up just exactly the same as when I was using my own software. And the magical thing that's so great about it is we don't have to worry. Or the is the map different? The map is not going to be different. The map is the same. So that is one thing that we don't have to worry about if we're trying to decide, are we into sidereal or are we more into this tropical placidus? However, there could be an interpretation slightly different, like I was going to mention to you, with you being on the Saturn line, that is kind of like a Mercury influence, right? Because your Saturn is in Gemini. So yes, it's the Saturn line, but it's tied in with Mercury, and that's good. You're doing this intellectual work, intellectual Mercury, work Saturn. But if we were going to be sidereal astrologers, then if we put that 22 degrees of that Saturn in the previous sign, then you might say, okay, well, now this Saturn is in Taurus energy, so it's more like a Venus with a Saturn type of thing. So when we are thinking about your astrocartography, that's one of the things that you do consider, is like that you're tapping into that energy in a slightly different way. Like, for example, myself being on the Venus line, my Venus is in Leo, so it's kind of like I'm on a sun line here. So, but if I was going to look at my sidereal natal chart, my Venus would be in Cancer, and then that would be like a moon line. I'm a more of a tropical Placidus person. I do take into consideration the whole houses as well, but I do prefer the Placidus tropical with consideration of whole house, and I do have respect for sidereal prediction techniques. I just don't resonate with it so much with the shift of the zodiac signs, but sidereal does have the aspects will always be the same. That's also really good between sidereal and tropical. And but the prediction of when the time comes out will be slightly different. But overall, it's not going to change the map, the biggest piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, for whichever system you're using.
Interesting. So what about people who want to just go like on astro.com and look up astrocartography versus going with a professional astrologer?
Well, I do encourage you to play around with it. It's interesting and you can get an idea of what's going on. However, I would definitely recommend a formal consultation with an astrologer who you feel is competent, because there's so many little details you can't really keep it straight. So like what I had mentioned before, what if you're a woman and you say, I'm going to go to the Venus line and I'm going to find my man, but then your Venus is horribly afflicted and you're not really understanding that. Or you say, like, oh, look, astro.com says I'm this far away from this parent line, which is really great. But maybe you're not understanding if you're really as close. An astrologer can tell you like exactly where that is on that latitude. And the closer you are to that parent line, the stronger it is, the more magical it can be. So you're missing out on a lot if you're not taking astrologer's opinion into consideration, and especially if you're going to be doing something as big as a relocation. That would definitely be something that would be worth your time and investment. Because you wouldn't want to. I know one person. It was so interesting. She knew a little bit about astrology, but not a lot. And she was on her Saturn line. She would get did a video on YouTube about this. She was on her Saturn line for like 18 years. She's like, I'm out of here. I'm so sick of this Saturn line. I'm going to the Sun line. I'm gonna find my fame and I'm going to be successful in my career. However, she has a Saturn opposing her sun. So then she basically ended up going on the to the sun line, but then her sun is getting beat up by Saturn, and so it was almost like she had gotten used to the Saturn line and was doing actually fairly well there, and then like going over there, it was like you're getting abused by that harsh planet. And so there can be benefits, of course, still to go to certain places if you're persevering and everything. But the theory with location astrology is life is hard enough as it is. It's like, can we just try and support ourselves and set ourselves up for the as most success and know that we still can make gains without having to, be crawling on our belly like army crawl, trying to get through our workday type of thing. So that's just an example of how you would think I'm going to go to the sun line, it's going to be fantastic. And actually, you didn't know that Saturn, the planet of dealing with restriction, confinement, sadness, is making a harsh aspect to that sun, and you're having to deal with that aspect.
Yeah, I really don't recommend that people do it on their own or look it up on. I mean, like you said, you can play around with it and look, but when it comes to actually moving somewhere, I would definitely go with a professional astrologer, but I would go with Jane actually because I had three other astrocartography readings um before I had one with you. Like not exactly prior. One was somewhat recent before you, but the other ones were like within a few years. And every one of those readings were completely different. I mean, they're like nothing was the same. And it doesn't, that's so weird to me. But like your reading was so in depth. And I liked it so much because you provided so much information. You did it really differently from the other people. I don't know how, I don't know the methods. I don't know how they did it, but whatever was presented to me was just I didn't, I don't know. I couldn't, there was no place to go. There was no place to move to. There was no, I don't know. It just was weird. But anyway, that's why I'm interviewing you. And I think everybody should go to you because you're really good and you look at things in a really good way. And that's what you're describing actually today. But I'm looking at some notes here because I wrote some questions down. Oh yeah. So is there any what if you do have like an afflicted or a not so well placed planet? Um, can you use astrocartography to improve that planet or make it work for you better?
Well, there's a concept that it's kind of like a shadowed planet. So a lot of planets that we have in our own chart might be shadowed in some way, like it's not doing its full expression. It could be based on the aspects that it's receiving or where it's placed in the horoscope. And it's weak. You haven't developed into it. So that's actually one of the advantages to finding yourself on one of those challenging lines because you are integrating that energy into yourself just by being there. So I didn't know I was on the Mars line until I found out I was on the Mars line. I was already there. So I just thought one other thing about the Mars line, I was the most disciplined exercise person I've ever been in my life. I was like, you'd think I was training for the Olympics, I was, the Mars is the athlete. But it was as I mentioned earlier, I was put in opportunities where I had to get stronger with that planet, where I said, I just feel so silly. I'm having such a hard time saying no to people. I'm creating more work for myself. And sometimes they don't even want me to be doing something. And I think that they want me to be doing it and I'm doing it. And it's so ridiculous. So it really was through the Mars line where I had the social emotional training, where I learned just basic things of saying, I disagree or I dislike that. I remember at the end of the year at that class, I said, I never knew you could say that. I never knew you could just say, I disagree. So there can be so much that you can learn from that. So, for example, on the Saturn line, you probably are going to learn how to be disciplined and responsible. And on the Pluto line, you're going to learn how to be able to rise from the ashes and transform yourself. So I don't necessarily say that you should say, "Oh, I'm not very responsible. I'm going to go the Saturn line and I'm going to become more responsible." It's more like, well, we can maybe have that with a better parent line, okay? Like with Saturn, with the sun, that would be more supportive. But it can be comforting to know if you look at yourself and you see that you're in a challenging area, that you just tell yourself, hey, I'm getting stronger for this. And I do believe in multiple lifetimes that we experience. And so I always think, hey, at least I'm growing in this skill now. So maybe I don't have to deal with it when I'm reborn in my next lifetime.
Yeah. I lived on my Mars line for most of my
Mm.
life. I'm from
Mm.
Washington, D.C., and I believe my Mars line runs through there, and I lived there most of my life. Even in Northern Virginia, it's like the suburbs of D.C. So, um, like I did exercise a lot too. And work. I was just, I mean, I don't know if you would call it a workaholic, but when you're an entrepreneur, you can be working all the time. And I did. If I wasn't working with clients, I was working on other aspects of work, the whole time. I was.
And Mars does help the entrepreneur, someone who's out there doing something trailblazing. So that
Yeah.
can,
So
I
I
was.
didn't mind, although I found I didn't have relationships with men. Like I didn't, I no dating relationships really worked. I mean, I did get married there and I got divorced pretty soon after. So like it wasn't that long of a marriage. So I read that somewhere that if a woman is living on her Mars line, it's not that beneficial for relationships with.
It's not. And I saw a book. Maybe I don't know if it was you. I read this too, but it was someone else, and it was just like a dire warning, actually. Like for women who are going to marry on the Mars line, you're like you might, be marrying someone who is like, some macho type of person
Yeah.
who's going to like have, challenges, being in a healthy masculine energy. So it can be a big disappointment for
Yeah.
women marrying on the Mars line, and it also is more challenging for women to be in more masculine areas like the Mars, and men may have more challenges with being on the Venus line or the Neptune line, but depending on each individual, right? Everyone has the masculine and the feminine, but generally speaking, women may struggle more on the Mars line, but men might even become too aggressive and too assertive on the Mars line.
Right. Right. So interesting. What, how can we tap into like the energy of a planet or remotely? Like,
Oh, okay. Yes, I love so remote activation is also very fascinating to me. So what that is it means when you go to an astrology location person, astrocartographer, that you are going to be primarily saying, I want to relocate, or where should I travel type of thing, or where could I maybe meet someone that I could be in a relationship with. But there's also things where you can even just know where the beneficial energy might be just in a certain region. So, for example, when I was married to a man who was from Russia, and my sun line and my Jupiter line goes right through Russia. And so I was like, oh, how interesting. And Jupiter is one of the rulers of my seventh house dealing with partnerships. So it's kind of like you can get like a clue into that. Like, oh yeah, the sun can represent the husband. That's my sun, and Jupiter is the ruler of my seventh house. Maybe I'm gonna pay more attention to this guy now that I know he's from Russia. So also I am involved with an astrology group that is in Tucson, Arizona. And that's an area I had considered, but I thought, no, there's reasons why I don't really want to go there. But what's cool about it is it's like Venus line and Uranus line crossing. And Venus deals with social connections, and Uranus deals with astrology. And right there, I'm able to tap in and go online, attend any of their classes that they have, interact with people, and get the best out of that area without even having to be there. So it can even be also like I met when I got that first astrocartography reading from the sidereal astrologer, he said, "Oh, you might meet an exciting man in New Jersey." And then when I was at the summer conference I went to recently, so this guy I was talking to, he was like, "Yeah, I'm from New Jersey, And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're a Venus Uranus contact from over there." And I thought, like, yeah, he is like an unusual, unique, different friend, which could be connected with Venus Uranus. So you could even ask yourself, I want to figure out how to do this. How can I, if I'm going to do any Facebook ads, how can I show it to people that are going to be in this area? Okay, that I see I could be the most fortunate in. And how can I know what products I want to buy from or what schools I want to go to? So these are all things that you're doing remotely. So I've even heard of people that when they try and make a vision board, they'll even take parts of the astrocartography map and even put that up there. And I haven't done that, but I thought that seemed interesting. But just in general, it's that you're still able to tap into those energies, though you're not even physically there. So I know everyone that comes from the East Coast, they might have like a moon influence. Like my flower essence teacher, she was from the East Coast. When she was teaching me, she was in Illinois, but I still knew she was had that moon influence on the East Coast. And one of the things about the moon line is that there could be a woman who's a mentor to you, and she might tell you things that you need to hear. And she was a mentor, and there was times when she was coaching me, and she would say something, and I thought like, oh yeah, you're right, it's true. And the next day she said, I hope I wasn't too forward. Is that okay? I said, no, I needed to hear that. That was great. So it's just another magical way to help you understand the world and also understand where people maybe might not be the most beneficial for you. So if you're seeing, you're like, you know what, I've got a Mars Pluto crossing line, one of the worst parents, and someone's coming up and asking you to go out on a date, and you already know you probably wouldn't want to date this person, but then you're like, oh my gosh, they're in the Mars Pluto parent area. That's just like right there, confirmation of things that you're going to invest in and things that you'll say, no, thank you.
So interesting. I
Mhm.
took an astrology class one time, and the teacher said if you put a picture of the a beneficial place for
Mhm.
you on your phone, you'll see as your wallpaper, you'll constantly be getting the energy from that place. Well, I did that because I had been told that it's like Venus and Jupiter, I believe, go down through the Gulf Coast of Florida for me. And um, and so I put a picture of that area, the water, the beach on my phone for a long time. And I also targeted some Google ads for my products that I make, the botanicals, Radiant Sun Botanicals is my company. And I actually got I don't know if it's one or two wholesale orders, for shops down there, literally. And
Mhm.
they do repeat business with me, which I just find fascinating.
Mhm.
Because there you go. That's literally Jupiter and Venus, and
Mhm.
yeah. So, and they're women, right? So women,
Mhm.
Venus, Jupiter, making money and luck and expansion and all that. So, isn't that it's amazing? I think we should utilize this more. It's kind of speaking for myself. I don't often like I changed the picture on my phone. I'm not like conscious of it all the
Mhm.
time, but I did do that and it worked. What else? Oh, yeah. So I have another question here. Do you have advice for anybody who is on a hard line, hard planetary line, or hard parent?
So that's, I know that sometimes it can be controversial with the AI, right? With Chat GPT. And so, but one of the things that I do like is that it can be a way to kind of be like a super fast, ultra effective Google search. And so if you know that you're on the Pluto line, you can go to ChatGPT and say, I'm on the Pluto line. What kind of things can I do to be able to utilize the Pluto energy in the most powerful way? Do you have any affirmations that that you recommend? What are the key things that I need to become skilled in? So if you really don't like AI, then you can try it other ways. But I have found that that's a nice way to use it and pretty non-controversial. I did recently hear something that shocked me because I don't listen to the news or anything. So sometimes I miss out on things that people knew a long time ago. But I heard that AI sometimes can just completely make a fact up. And like they just will even like make it sound like it's like from a certain place. I mean, that shocked me. I said, what? Why don't they just say they don't know? But I think, but I think for something like, if you're asking like for the Pluto line, when I've played around with that, I've liked the things that they've said, and I thought like, yes, an astrologer, this is an advice that an astrologer would say. So that would be, and I would say to learn everything you can actually about that planet and about that sign that rules it. So finding out all the best qualities and all of the most challenging qualities, and then you can support yourself. Like for example, I was mentioning earlier to Stephanie that I, I had filmed a video and I was so disappointed because it didn't go well, and the lighting was off, and I had was very upset about it. But the reason why I noticed I was taking it so extremely to heart was I knew I was on my Venus Chiron crossing. And like Venus can deal with your art projects, and a video is like an art project. And Chiron deals with like opening up old wounds. So I looked at that video. I said the lighting was so bad. Like I looked at like so distorted, and it opening up old wounds that a woman might have about how she feels about her appearance, right? But when I was able to then like in my mind click and say, that's why this is hurting so bad. And this is, this is a key way for you to be releasing some of that pain and shame and type of things that you have, then it was easier for me. So even going into ChatGPT, writing in, how could this problem be related to my Pluto line that I'm on? How could this issue that I'm having be related to the Saturn line? And my number one recommendations, utilize that free AI software. If you're so not gonna do that because you don't like that, and then utilize any other kind of internet search, or even better, physical books, of really knowing that sign's energy, the zodiac sign and the planet.
Yeah, I think that the probably, well, anyway, I'm not going to use AI because I'm not for
Mhm.
it, but this is my advice for people like me. Study, and you just mentioned it, really. Study the planets, because there's always an exalted or a higher octave or a higher expression of each planet. So when it comes to Pluto, it's about power, personal power. So instead of, if anybody's on their Pluto line, and by the way, before I get into that, we are going to be, doing this video as a premiere. So if you're watching it, you already know that by now. But because of that, you can put questions in the chat and ask Jane, and she and I are going to be live in the chat when you're watching it. So be asking Jane questions, because this is an opportunity for you to maybe get little questions answered and interact with her about astrocartography. And because it's going back to Pluto, for example, if anybody's on their Pluto line, just instead of feeling like everyone's attacking you, feel like it's an opportunity for you to be in your power. Because I mean, there's going to be a lot of projection with Pluto. People are going to be, don't you think, like people will be like attacking you because you're emanating the essence of transformation, and it's very deep. It's like it goes down into the depths, and pretty much explodes what things to then be rebirthed, death, birth, transformation and rebirth. And you're personally going to be going through that, but you're also going to be receiving the projections from others. And so when you're on a Pluto line, it's important to keep on reminding yourself, this is my opportunity to be in my personal power, always in your power, versus feeling like you're being squashed. And so that can go for any other planet, like Saturn. Even I didn't know I was living on my Saturn line until the end, but like, I don't know. I almost feel like I couldn't have overcome but that energy, because it felt so oppressive. But maybe there were parents that I didn't know about too going through there. But I would say, just like, if you're not going to be using AI, study the planets, find out their highest expression, and try to be in that. Because we can always use astrology to our benefit, and it never means that you are, doomed, or there's no way out of a situation. It never means that. We can always find ways to make it better. Yeah. So, do you have anything else to share?
Mm, I don't necessarily have anything else to share, but there is, I will say that when you do a reading with myself, I've started incorporating additionally something called local space lines. So we didn't
Local
talk
space,
about
what?
this local space line. So you can see it on astro.com, and there's two options, and it's one of the options. But when I am looking at your chart, I'm incorporating we're looking at your natal chart, we're looking at the astrocartography map, we're looking at specifically also doing relocated charts. So I'll talk about that. That's a good one. That it's also important to know, even if you're not shifting too much on your parents or your lines, or you don't know if the parents or lines are going to be, so supportive to you, that sometimes if you're moved from your birth location, if you're moving a significant distance across the United States or anywhere in the world, if it's a significant distance, particularly east to west, then you can have certain planets in this relocated chart shift to a different house. So let's say that you feel like that you're not really enjoying having a certain element. Well, for example, my Venus and Saturn are in the 12th house. So it's always going to be there. That's my natal chart. However, when I moved from my birth location of Iowa over to Idaho, then I was able to get that Venus and I was able to put it on my ascendant. So yes, I had Saturn actually does kind of well in the 12th house, but it's still always going to be there in my natal chart. But now there's a shift of energy where those planets have moved into a different house. So now I'm thinking like, okay, now my Venus gets to be seen a little bit more rather than hidden. And there's other planets that sometimes can be beneficial. Let's say if you have a lot of planets that are in the eighth house, which can be a challenging house to have, or the sixth house is also a challenging house, or the 12th house. It can be beneficial to get some of our personal planets, particularly, shifted over into a different house. So that's basically when I say relocated chart, what we do is we just pretend that you were born there. You put your same exact birth information in, but we say this city and this state, and it shows what it would look like if you were born there. So that relocated chart does have an influence for you in those areas. So that's another way that we can look at to try and find preferable location for you, is taking into consideration that relocated chart. And I think just in general, like to point out, I just think I love to do the system of let's look at where you're at and let's find three places and go from there. When I have people that are interested in readings, I have a custom form and I can have them fill it out. So I ask them things like, I'm asking leading questions like, do you want the sun energy or do you want the moon energy? They don't maybe know that that's what I'm asking about, but and I'll also ask you, well, what about your location? Is there a certain area that you're most interested in? Is there some that you absolutely wouldn't want to go to? So we look at the whole picture. I'm not going to, tell you that you should go to a place, a remote place that there's no way that you would really be able to prosper. I might mention it, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's I would keep in mind, we have to be practical. You have to balance it both. Okay. So for my services, there was a person I saw yesterday, and she was so fun because she was like anywhere in the United States. I was like, oh my gosh, but that's awesome. But then it was even kind of strange where it was coming up, and I was like, oh, she's not gonna maybe like to hear what I'm saying. What was it? The Oh, Hot Springs, Arkansas. So because she said, I want water, I want green, and I'm trying to get her on that Moon Jupiter line. That was the best line that she had. And I said, I'm a little afraid to tell you, but Arkansas or the northern Texas. But when you actually look into some of these places, you're actually like, oh, they do have water. It's just maybe not the ocean. Okay. And oh, they do have some kind of a new age or spirituality community. They have some stores there. So it may be something that, like, I never thought I was going to move to Idaho. I didn't know anything about Idaho. And in fact, it was one of my last choices of the different choices I was told could be preferable for myself. And I remember thinking, who moves to Boise, Idaho? And I Google search and I was like, actually, a lot of people do. Okay, this isn't so bad. So when you start looking into some of these places, like a place that you thought was like, no way, you're like, oh, well, Arkansas has much better cost of living. Okay. And oh, look, it does have, a certain spiritual community. And the thing is if that energy, if your birth time is accurate and we're really putting you on your moon Jupiter parent, or we're putting you on a line that is very positively influenced in your own natal chart, things are going to go together nicely there. You're not going to suffer there. So, but of course, we do recommend that you go and visit. But I only visited Boise for a weekend. And I said, okay, I rode my bike on the Boise Bike Trail one day and then did this other direction the other day. Went to Boise Fry Company, went to the resale shops, and I said, what else do I need to see? I guess I could live here, but just as much as anywhere else. And that was all it was. But at least one time you got to go visit. And I recommend, maybe 3 nights or so to get a feel for it and really notice, how do people interact with me? What happens here? Do I feel lucky? Do I feel special? Or do weird things happen? So the other thing, lastly, to keep in mind is that sometimes there can be better times to relocate than others. And sometimes you can see in the chart where actually you might be relocating to a certain planetary energy based on what's happening in your chart. So that's another thing that an astrologer can do. On my custom form, I say, realistically, if you were going to be moving, when would it be? And then I'm able to look and see if I think that looks like the planets are in your favor to do so.
And that's based on transits, right?
Transits, and also we can look at progressions and solar arc.
So, you know how you said that the Neptune North Node pairing where I am is not based on my natal chart? It's based on something else?
What I meant by that was that it is based on your natal chart, but it's not like the planetary major line of Neptune or even the local space line of Neptune. We'd say, oh, let's go to Stephanie's chart. Let's look at her Neptune, make sure it's not too adversely afflicted. But for the parent line, you don't need to so much worry. Oh, because then it's very limiting if you would do that. And the parents are a little bit of a different energy. It's a little bit, if you get two beneficial lines, you got Moon and Jupiter coming together, you don't have too much to worry about if you have what's going on with your Moon or your Jupiter in there, which is nice. So that's what I meant, is just that we don't have to be so concerned about what's going on in your natal chart based on a parent, but we're definitely trying to keep you away from some of the most traditionally challenging parent lines.
And I had an astrocartographer. I was looking into North Myrtle Beach in 2020, um, because my son was going to be graduating from high school in 2023, and I was looking for, like, where would I move, after he graduates, where would I want to live? And I had a astrocartography reading about North Myrtle Beach, and he said, "Oh, you've had past lives there. That's why you're drawn there." What is that? Is that Neptune? Is that Moon? Why did he say that?
I would guess it was because it's the nodes,
The node.
because the nodes have a karmic, destined, fate-like past life
Yeah, but that's
connection.
I usually think of past lives as south node, but this is the north
Mhm.
node. So,
I see it in my write-up. Let me make sure. But yes, I tend to think of it as a past life would be more of the south node, but just in general, anytime you're dealing with the nodes, you can be dealing with people from past life situations
mhm,
that are connected with nodes.
that's interesting. Uh, um, any other things you want to mention before we end?
Well, I think I just want to say that let's see, anything else? Nothing else except that maybe keep in mind that the location of astrology is literally the ultimate feng shui. And it's like if you're looking to really change things up and you're feeling like you're stuck in a certain place, and particularly if you maybe you don't have any children, maybe you're not in a committed relationship, maybe you're already working remotely, you are a perfect candidate for relocation. As Stephanie was in that situation where she didn't have to consider so much other family members and so forth. She already had her business remote. So, remote workers, if you are not, if you have the ability to move, you're not tied down by family, then this could be a big game changer because it's just setting you up for much success. And it's something that you can have a say in. Now, you can say to the astrocartographer, you can say only the Pacific Northwest. I don't care. I don't care what's going on there. Just pick the best place in these two states, and they can help you with that. So
Yeah.
just you're the one who's telling the astrocartographer what you want. So yeah, you have a lot of say in it. But at the other hand, there is benefit to hearing what they say about your little hotspot areas.
I agree. We
Mhm.
can't do it on our own. We really
Mhm.
cannot like look it up on our own and figure it out. We need a professional. I about the Pacific Northwest, that is such a not good place for me. I looked at that was me doing my own, checking
Mhm.
online and I was like, yeah. But then an astrologer an astrocartographer did tell me it wouldn't be good. And I thought that's so
Mhm.
interesting because my sister lives in Seattle and I went there and just I knew I would never live here. Like it's so interesting
Mhm.
to feel that in different locations. Well, anyway, Jane, it has been such a pleasure having you on and learning from you. It's so interesting, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And just remind everybody where we can find you.
Oh, well, you can find me on janemasteller.com, and I have a Facebook group. It's called Jane Masteller Astrology. So you can join that where I'm posting my new videos. I have Jane Masteller Astrology on YouTube, and you can also reach me in email, jane@janemasteller.com.
And we can find your flower essences on your website too.
Yep, you can find my flower essences, and I don't have a page up yet for the frequency healing, but that will be coming out soon.
That is so great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. I've had so much fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.